Hello guys, welcome to the channel once more. Today we're gonna do something a little bit different. I think it's gonna be really fun. It's gonna show you that sometimes new things are not the best. So short story, a couple of days ago they were going to throw away a bunch of old computers were going to be thrown away at my office, and I asked like, hey, can I get some spare parts from them? And they were like, yeah, sure, get whatever you want. So I started like looking around the computers and I found a couple of AMD systems, right? And the thing that caught my attention the most, and you guys may have noticed from the thumbnail, was this. This is the cooler that those AMD systems had. As you can see, it's a pretty big cooler, even though it's like an 80 millimeter fan on top. This is a big cooler. I actually was able to get two of these out of an AMD Phantom 2 CPU and also an AMD Athlon 2. They both had the same cooler. Now the interesting thing here is if you compare it to the AMD Wraith Stealth cooler that comes with the AMD Ryzen 5 3600 and Ryzen 5 5600X, you can see that the fan of the Wraith is way bigger. But look at this, you get pretty much half the amount of fins and aluminum and actual like heat absorbing heatsink on the Wraith Stealth. And as soon as I saw this, I was wondering, well, should I just test it with my Ryzen 5 and see how it performs, compare it to the Wraith and compare it to my Vetroo V5, which is the cooler that I'm currently using. So that's what I did, and the results are pretty interesting. First of all, let me just talk about a little bit of the system that we're going to use today to compare these two coolers and how the methodology is going to be. So basically we're going to use my system, which is a AMD Ryzen 5 3600 system, basically with an with an ASRock B550M Steel Legend motherboard. It's got 16 gigabytes of G.Skills Ripjaws 5 at 3200 megahertz, two 8 gigabyte sticks. It also has a M.2 NVMe, which I don't remember exactly which it was, but I'm gonna write it here on the side somewhere. And the graphics card, it's a AMD Radeon RX 6700 XT. And the power supply is a Thermaltake 650 watts. So pretty decent system. It's all inside a Thermaltake Versa H18 tempered glass case, nothing fancy. It has got 3 PWM fans on the front as intake and 2 3-pin fans as exhaust. The idea is that since this cooler, the old AMD cooler, only has a 3-pin cable connector, I'm just gonna run all fans at maximum speed just to see like what's, not only to keep them at the same level, but also to see what's the maximum amount of cooling that each cooler is able to provide. The thermal paste that I'm going to be using is the Noctua NHT1, something like that. I'm also going to compare the Vetroo stock thermal paste that comes with the cooler with that thermal paste, the Noctua thermal paste, and see if there's any difference. So we'll kind of like check and test a couple of things in this video. Just so you guys can have an idea of why maybe AMD decided to go with a smaller cooler, I have some data that I would like to show to you. Well, I'm gonna read it to you because I couldn't remember. So the AMD Phantom 2, the one that I have specifically, it's the 840T, which is a 4-core, 4 threads CPU. It's got a 2.9 gigahertz base clock and 3.2 gigahertz boost clock. But the interesting thing here is that the TDP is 95 watts. The Athlon 2 640, which is another processor from which I got the same cooler, It's also a 4-core, 4-thread CPU. It's got a 3.0 gigahertz base clock. I wasn't able to find the actual boost clock of that CPU, but the TDP is also 95 watts. Now, something interesting is that I couldn't find it for the Phenom 2, but for the Athlon 2, I could find that the temperature range in which it was made to work was 55 degrees to 71 degrees. That's interesting because now we go to the AMD Ryzen 5 3600. This is a 6-core, 12 threads CPU with a base clock of 3.6 gigahertz and a boost clock of 4.2 gigahertz. But the TDP is 65 watts. And more importantly, the max temperature is 95 degrees. So we're seeing that AMD was not only able to boost the speeds, threads, and cores of this CPU, but they were also able to boost the max temperature that their CPUs were able to work at, while at the same time they were able to lower the watts that the CPUs are able to that the CPUs need. So that's maybe one of the reasons they went with a smaller CPU cooler, but even then, we'll see the results of the test. I already made the test and the results are pretty interesting. Keep in mind that the temperature of the room where I'm gonna run the tests is 24 degrees. So all the temperatures are gonna, vary depending on the room where you're testing, and if you're testing on an open bench or inside a case with a tempered glass panel, like I did, which is not kind of like closer to real life situations. But yeah, so we're gonna jump to the results. Well, first I'm gonna show you how to install this CPU, because many people, this is an AM2 plus AM3 socket type. It's compatible with AM4 sockets, but it uses the little clamps, like tension clamps on the side, which I believe is, it's not easier, but it's faster, since you don't need to remove the stock plastic thingies that come with AMD motherboards. And I'm just going to show you how to install this CPU in particular. The other two, well, there are plenty of videos out in the internet, so I'm going to show you this one, and then we will jump to the results and compare the result of, well, 3 coolers in the Vetroo with 2 different thermal pastes. The tests, I'm gonna keep the temperatures, like I'm gonna record temperatures on hardware monitor, like the maximum temperature, and the benchmark that we're gonna use is Cinebench R23. I think it's the most realistic, and not realistic because we're pushing the CPU to its limit, but it's the benchmark that most people use. So that's what we're going to do. So let's jump back. Let's jump to the CPU cooler installation. Okay, so we're gonna start by I'm gonna show you the process of installing this cooler, the one that I told you about. I'm gonna start with the assumption that you guys still have the brackets that came with the motherboard. If not, well, they come with the motherboard, and if not, you should have kept them if you threw them away after you install your stock cooler. But the process is going to be really simple. This cooler comes with the old snappy kind of procedure that clicks into place on this bracket. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take my thermal paste, and like I said, I'm going to do the same thermal paste application for all the coolers. I like the line method. This is the method that I like. A little bit more here. Okay, apply a little bit of thermal paste. Let me close it here, put it on the side. And what we're going to do is, like, there's some people that like this system, there's some people that don't. I think it's relative, but let me try to do it. So you're supposed to clip this side first to a notch that is under here, and then you're gonna clip the other side on the other notch and then tighten everything. So according to the internet, even though this cooler came with a AM2 plus AM3 bracket, it should work with the AM2 bracket. So we're going to,
especially lighting on my head on the camera. There we go. So I click one side, and now I have the back. Yeah, you can tell it's my first time. Maybe if I do it the opposite way. Let me see. Problem is that I have my GPU on the way and I didn't want to take it out. There we go. Well, whatever. Just realized that the now the fan cable is on this side. Well, either way. There we go. It's not as easy as it looks, but it's snug as hell. Maybe the thermal paste application was not the best. Sure it wasn't, but let me see if the cable is long enough. Keep in mind, like I said, this fan comes with a 3-pin cable, which is not the ideal cable. The ideal pin type is gonna be enough to run our tests, but it's not the ideal. Would be better if it came with a 4-pin. By the way, install the cooler the other way around, that way you end up with the cable on this side. But I'm gonna tell you, that's snug, pretty snug. Now, a main advantage that I can see here is there's more space around the CPU. So for instance, here's the stock Wraith cooler, and if I put it on top, you can see how big that fan is. Yeah, it's bigger, which is not always better, but this one is smaller, but the tower is way taller. So we'll see how that works. Let me just close my case. I'm gonna try to close, yeah, I'm gonna close it all. I'm gonna run back to the computer. I'm not gonna show you the installation process of the Vetroo or the Wraith, just because, well, there's plenty of videos about that on the internet. So let me go do that, and we'll see the results at the end.
Okay guys, so I'm gonna do this part real quick. I'm just gonna use my laptop's camera, but I already ran all the tests. I ran one for each cooler. I know I could have done more, but I just wanted to have a rough idea on how these coolers differentiate between them. And I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm pretty interested with the results. Like, there's some things that I wasn't expecting, some things that I did expect, but I'm gonna show it to you right here in this spreadsheet, super spreadsheet. I don't know how to make fancy graphs, I'm sorry. But on the left side, we have the temperatures, the maximum temperature. On the right side, we have the Cinebench score. Now, I don't know why, but the graphs are organized from the top to bottom. So the first here corresponds to the one on the bottom. But let's see, for example, interesting things. Of course, the Wraith Stealth was the worst performer in terms of temperatures and score. It got all the way to 89 at full speed, 89 degrees, and it achieved a score of 9,055. That was expected. I already knew that was going to happen, that was the maximum score, maximum temperature, and the maximum score I was going to be able to achieve with that. Now on the other side, we have the old AMD cooler, and this is super interesting. So we got 82 degrees maximum temperature on the cooler, but we got a Cinebench score of 9,252. Now let's compare that with the Vetroo cooler, with the stock paste, the one that comes with the cooler. We got to a maximum of 71 degrees, which is 11 degrees less, but our score was also less than the old AMD cooler, 9,207. That's pretty interesting. That tells you that temperatures is it's not everything with these with how CPUs work. I would just guess that maybe the fact that this old AMD cooler is a down firing type of cooler, it was cooling the VRAM. It was cooling the VRM, and that could have helped for a cleaner delivery, like power delivery to the CPU, probably. But the other thing is that, look at this, the Vetroo with the Noctua paste reached 73 degrees. Now that could have been my bad, like I could have just like made a mistake spreading the thermal paste, or it was maybe statistical error between the two. Either way, that just shows you that fancy brands of thermal paste and the thermal paste that comes with the Vetroo, like extra points for the Vetroo. I mean, it comes with enough paste, I would dare say, for 3 applications, because I already done 2 and I still have left. So you can do probably like 3 applications with the paste that comes with the Vetroo, and it performs as well as with the Noctua paste. So you get that. But look at this. With the stock paste, we got 9,207, but with the Noctua paste, we got 9,322. So we got roughly more than 100 points more with the Noctua paste. You can draw your conclusions from there. I don't know what happened there. I mean, you can see it here in the graph. Like, I'm taking 9,000 as a 0, like how big the difference was with the Noctua paste with respect to the stock paste, which, by the way, we got better scores with the old AMD cooler than with the Vetroo. So yeah, I mean, you have the graphs here, you have the information here of the numbers that I got. Now, yeah, you might say, okay, cool. The old AMD cooler was made for a 95 watts TDP CPU. Of course, it's going to perform better on a 65 watts TDP CPU. Now, that's true. And if you put that old cooler next to, let's say, for example, a Wraith Spire, you'll see like the size is comparable. It's just that the Wraith Spire has a bigger fan, so it's going to perform even better. Now, what I just wanted to show you here is that, one, if you're able to find a computer that someone's going to throw away, that it has one of these coolers, and you have a Ryzen 5 3600 or a Ryzen 5 5600X or something like that, if it's free, take it, use it. I mean, this is going to be way better than a Wraith Stealth, and it's going to get you by. But keep something in mind, it's super important. That thing, that cooler, the old AMD cooler, uses an 80 something millimeters fan. That thing is loud as hell, and not only is loud, it spins like super fast. It goes at more than 4,000 RPMs. Super loud. So maybe part of the performance or part of why it works so good is just because the fan spins like incredibly fast. Probably, but that's something that you can choose to use or not. I just wanted to show you that if you happen to come by one of these coolers, that's going to be better than the Wraith Stealth. And AMD, shame on you, because this is a cooler from 10 years ago. I mean, come on, and you're giving us a Wraith Stealth that's barely keeping up with the CPU at full throttle. Like, I mean, something like that. I would love to have a Wraith Spire to compare it with this one. I'm pretty sure it's gonna perform better on a Ryzen 5 3600, because remember, the Wraith Spire used to come with, I believe, like the Ryzen 7s. The old Ryzen 7s, the new Ryzen 7s don't come with a cooler. Draw your own conclusions from here, but there you go. Here are the numbers. The numbers don't lie, and this is what I got. So thank you so much for watching once again, guys. I hope this was interesting, a bit different, but interesting. And as always, if you have any comments, any suggestions, leave it down in the comment section below, and we'll see you on the next one.